Sometimes it is good when the bad guy wins. We're so used to that Hollywood ending that getting something different hits us like a ton of bricks. How did the hero of the day not walk away with their hand held high? Most of the time this is not a factor, even though there are occasions where it would be quite appreciated. I mean, imagine Darth Vader stood tall at the end of Return of the Jedi. It would have changed the world. The issue when making these decisions is that it all depends on what story you're trying to tell. If you have a super evil guy that does terrible things and you're in control of their fate, it's probably always best for that guy to have their ass kicked and move on. Unsurprisingly, wrestling doesn't always get that right. I'm Simon for What Culture. Remember to hit that subscribe button. This is 10 wrestling feuds where the bad guy won. Billie Eilish. Number 10, Triple H versus Sting. Very much a case of the WWE guy going over the WCW guy because the match was happening in a World Wrestling Entertainment ring. The real problem was how the narrative here changed when we got to WrestleMania 31. Sting had made a point of saying this wasn't about promotion versus promotion and instead was about the game's reign of terror. At the pay-per-view, we were seeing DX and the NWO getting involved, even though Sting's hottest time in World Championship Wrestling was when he was battling that group. It was so weird. And sure, there were plenty of shenanigans to try and protect the icon, but this was his first match in WWE, and he just lost, even though the fans wanted him to win. Triple H wasn't even that fussed, because an hour or so later, he was back out there kicking off a feud with Ronda Rousey and The Rock. Poor Sting felt like an afterthought, and yes, he was the good guy. As we have brought up Triple H too, we also have to remember everything that happened between him and Booker T at WrestleMania 19. That's probably the worst thing that's ever gone down. Number 9, Razor Ramon versus Randy Savage. When Razor Ramon interfered in a match between the world champion Randy Savage and Ric Flair during Primetime Wrestling in 1992 and cost him the title, everybody thought it was on. Razor was the hot new heel in the company, Randy was the ever-present legend, and this was going to be a feud for the ages, surely. The Ultimate Warrior eventually got involved, saving Savage from a beating, and we were all ready for Razor and Flair to team together to take on Wario and Macho Man at the Survivor Series, but we didn't get it. After WWE and the Ultimate One fell out, Mr. Perfect was drafted in as his replacement, but the end result was a DQ because Rick and Ramon basically overly beat up their opponents. It was like a boxer who wouldn't back off, also known as Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. From there though, poof, it was gone. Instead of Savage getting any kind of revenge, the real-life Scott Hall was getting so popular with the crowd, WWE felt like they had to turn him face. This started when he clashed with the new world champion Bret Hart at the Rumble the following year, and by that point we'd all turned a corner. Any plans for revenge were scrapped, and essentially the literal bad guy had run through Randy and never got his comeuppance. Think of that. Number 8, Edge versus Matt Hardy. This was just bizarre. It's one thing to book someone being an asshole, but in 2005, the very real falling out between Edge and Matt Hardy became public. Boy, howdy did it get bad. As it turned out, while Matt had been recovering from an injury, best friend and confidant Edge had been canoodling with his actual girlfriend Lita. When Hardy found out, he talked about it online, and it created such a stink that WWE fired him. It was a mess. Due to overwhelming fan feedback and drowning out arenas with his name, Matt was eventually brought back, but the subsequent feud saw the rated R superstar just destroy this poor man who had lost the love of his life. WWE would claim that Hardy got a win at Unforgiven, but go back and watch that now and let me know what you think. Then go and watch SummerSlam and also get back to me. Edge punched Matt in the face so many times he bled like a pig, and again the referee stopped the match early. So he not only got cheated on, but was also pulverized when he had a chance to challenge his adulterer. He even got screwed over by Lita when she held onto his foot during a match on Raw with Edge, which allowed the latter to reclaim his Money in the Bank briefcase, and the only plus here was that Hardy got his job back. Amazingly, it also cemented Edge's heel status and made him such an insufferable prick that he became a better main eventer because of it. That is wrestling. Number 7, Randy Orton versus Kofi Kingston. Remember when Randy Orton called Kofi Kingston stupid during their 2019 feud? Well, it was a callback to when they clashed 10 years earlier. Then, however, Orton wasn't saying it to be cute. He was saying it because he was living with Kofi so much so It stopped the young Kingston's push dead in its tracks. It started at Survivor Series 2009 when Kingston scored a victory over Randy in an elimination match, and then went into a clash with the master of the RKO as well as his running buddy's Legacy. A leg drop through a table on Raw live from Madison Square Garden got the kind of reaction an up-and-coming hero should be getting, and everything was in place for Kofi to get a proper win over the Viper and cement himself as the man. That is not what happened. Instead, after botching an RKO punt spot during a match, Randy lost it for real, called him stupid, and was so critical about Kingston to management that we went in a completely different direction. Orton beat him clean as a whistle, and Kofi wasn't even allowed to look at Randy ever again. Can you believe it? Number 6, Ted DiBiase versus Dusty Rhodes. This one was almost too much. After spending his time pre-match looking for his sweet Sapphire, who had been by his side for most of the year, Dusty Rhodes reluctantly had to forget about this, and he made his way to the ring to face Randy Savage at SummerSlam 1990. His heart was then destroyed as Ted DiBiase came out instead, with his former valet by his side, and revealed that she was now with him. Rhodes' night then got even worse when he lost to the Macho Man in about a minute after his manager Sherry Martel had smacked him with her purse. It seemed like it was all leading to Dusty going crazy on these fools, but as ever, nothing happened. With the American Dream planning to go back to WCW, he decided to use whatever influence he had to get his son Dustin some TV exposure. That did result in a tag team match with them going against the $1 Million Man and Virgil, but in that, the Rhodes family lost. Weirdly, it would be Virgil who went on to get revenge when he turned on DiBiase, and of course he was only called Virgil because that was Dusty's real first name, and WWE thought it would be funny to do this. Professional wrestling can be really confusing. Number 5, Sergeant Slaughter versus the Ultimate Warrior. The Sergeant Slaughter character was just awful in the early 90s. Turned into an Iraqi sympathizer during the Gulf War, which was just tasteless, it made people want to turn off their TV rather than boo him because it was too much. Wrestling was meant to be escapism, and this was just a window into how bad the world currently was. Vince McMahon didn't see it this way. When the 1991 Royal Rumble rolled around, he ensured this Slaughter beat the Ultimate Warrior for the world title, so that we could dive into this storyline far deeper than anybody could have believed. The idea, of course, was for the real American Hulk Hogan to save the day at WrestleMania, but that caused a problem for the Warrior, as he was now the odd man out. So it was decided that the Macho Man would cost him the match by hitting Ultimate with his scepter, which meant any idea of a rematch between the Army guy and the Crazy Alien never happened. I guess the Ultimate Warrior just didn't care about war or the fact he had lost his championship, although he did go on to have one of his better matches with Randy Savage at WrestleMania, so there's always that. Number 4, Triple H versus Eugene. 2004 Raw was really weird. Having a Triple H Eugene feud wasn't a bad thing, but no one quite knew what this was meant to do. If Eugene had won all this, it would have made sense, but there is more chance that Mojo Rawley gets a sustained push in 2020 than that happening. Again, this was Triple H versus Eugene. It started when the game started to sing Eugene's praises, much to the confusion of his Evolution teammates, but as it turned out, this was simply to help him get a win over Chris Benoit. Yes, that makes no sense, but don't worry about it, stuff just happens. Even worse, the plan backfired, and the game was so furious, he walloped Eugene to the point the character had nowhere to go afterwards. So Triple H was in the same place, Eugene was worse off, and none of it was very entertaining. Obviously, we never saw any kind of rematch, and now it's best to just forget about it. I apologize for bringing it up. Number 3, Yokozuna versus Lex Luger. As Vince McMahon looked for his new Hulk Hogan in 1993, he thought he had found it in Lex Luger. It was quite the shift, as before this he was flexing in a mirror as the narcissist, but hell, he was jacked, so that will do. The change was on. Fortunately, it didn't work. For whatever reason, Luger just didn't connect with the fans, and unsurprisingly, having him drive a bus around the United States was not the answer. Unless, of course, you always wanted to see Lex flex on top of a vehicle, I can only assume that audience was quite limited. He was still placed to feud with then WWE champion Yokozuna, but this didn't go well for him either. He scored a count-out victory when they first clashed, and he really should have won there to capitalize on what the plan was, and by the time they fought again at WrestleMania, McMahon had given up. Luger lost via DQ, Bret was the anointed one instead, and then Lex went in an utterly different direction, and he didn't even smell Yokozuna's sweat again. Then he was back in WCW. What a mess. Number 2, The Authority versus Daniel Bryan. If you're any kind of behind-the-scenes fan, you already know that Daniel Bryan was never meant to have his moment at WrestleMania 30, and it mainly went down because of fans screaming this is what they wanted. Thankfully, we did get there, but it really sucked because hardly any time after winning the world title, he had to give it up because of injuries. It was heartbreaking. WWE decided to keep the story going via Brie Bella and Stephanie McMahon, which made sense, and it went fine for a little bit. Stephanie, for example, needed Triple H to subdue Nikki when they clashed before SummerSlam so she could win. This wasn't the boss's daughter just running wild. Then it did get a little bit murky. When they actually had a match at the pay-per-view, we just changed parts. Triple H and McMahon were taking out the angle altogether as Nikki attacked her sister, and we began that feud instead. It was never really explained as to why, nor was it explained why they made up a few months later. In fact, the only thing memorable from all of this was when Nikki yelled she would have preferred it if her twin had died in the womb. My word. The Authority then moved on to other things, which meant the Bryans were never able to get any revenge. And yeah, I know Daniel standing there with the titles at WrestleMania meant something, but the story continued after that and stopped here forever. Number 1, Shawn Michaels versus Bret the Hitman Hart. When Vince McMahon screwed Bret Hart in 1997, he didn't just take away the world title from the Hitman, he stole his passion for pro wrestling. The coolest thing about Bret was he believed in everything he was doing and held himself that way even away from the ring. He took pride in being a hero for people and backed that up with a level of professionalism that was respected by nearly everyone. He was a wrestler's damn wrestler. It's a reason why he clashed with Shawn Michaels so much, someone who at the time operated in the complete opposite fashion. This had all exploded when HBK had told Hart he would never lose to him in a match, which of course led to Bret responding that he wouldn't lose in Montreal, and well, you know the rest. But it did mean that Shawn took the role of both the on and off-screen heel who walked away with the world title and kept his job, whereas Hart went to WCW as a different man. Bret never got any sense of light at the end of the tunnel for this, even when he came back to bury the hatchet in 2010, and that is a sad situation, and definitely what Elton John was singing about. The two seem fine now, which is good, but 20 or so years ago, this one really kicked you in the balls. Know of any other wrestling feuds when the bad guy won? Don't forget to let us know in the comments below, and then like the video, share the video, and hit that subscribe button. My name is Simon from What Culture, and I will talk to you when I talk to you. That's just a fact.